Hey folks, welcome back to Tenta Outdoors. My name is Alan from Season 10 of Alone. Today's video, we're doing Alone Season 12 Africa, Episode 2 recap. Stick around. So just a quick recap from last week. We had Kelsey kill Pumbaa, which was about a 100-pound warthog. Quick, clean kill, very excited. We got big game down on the first episode. We had Katie catch a large fish. And we had Jit tap out of the competition due to a stomach illness of some sort. And we're not exactly sure how he caught it because as far as we know, he boiled the water before he drank it. And we're trying to figure out, there's a lot of questions in the comments about how I think he got that stomach-borne illness, and no idea. It was actually a pretty decent episode. And this week we are meeting the final 5 contestants that we haven't met yet. So the first contestant we meet this week was a Canadian named Baja. Now I did notice that they cut down on the Canadians this season. Usually there's 2. This season there's only 1. What's up with that? So Baja started out his first scene. He was chasing after the helicopter yelling, "I've changed my mind! I've changed my mind!" It was pretty funny. He's chasing it away, yelling that over and over again. And maybe he was yelling that just to kind of, instead of like feeling nervous and getting symptoms of drop shock, maybe he was like, yeah, if I goof off and joke around, maybe I won't feel the drop shock. I'm not sure, but I thought it was a pretty funny thing to do, a different thing to do. Instead of saying like, oh, I'm finally all alone, he's like, just made a joke out of it. I liked it. So one of the first things Baja did was he hammered a stake in the ground and used the shadow of the sun to determine direction. And he quite quickly realized that there's a ridge close to his camp and that the sun would rise behind that ridge, which would not give his camp enough sunlight to warm him up in the morning. And he didn't like that. He wanted the morning sun to help him recover from a cold night. So he decided to move camp. So he packed up his stuff and he headed out. Now he didn't have any water, and we'll talk about that in a little while. And we're not sure how far he went, but he seemed to be going for quite a long time. He got quite tired, he was a little dehydrated, and he ended up finding a nice new spot. He liked it because there was lots of firewood available, and he noticed there was some clay available too. And you can use the clay for a number of different things, either building a chimney, helping construct your shelter, making a crude pot or something to hold water. And so he liked that. And I think he made a good choice moving, and we'll see if it pays off. So we learned fairly quickly that Baja did not bring a ferro rod as one of his 10 items. So he had a plan to use friction fire, a bow drill fire, to get all his fire going. Now, there are some contestants in the past that haven't brought a ferro rod. Colton, Luke, and I think there were a few more. And I'm not sure that that's a good idea. It just, fire is such an important part of your experience out there. And in this year with Africa and that foul water, I think having quick access to build a fire is a good idea. If you have the proper wood to use a bow and drill fire, it's not that hard with practice. Like if there was a bunch of cedar available, it's not a big deal. But going into an area that you don't know about, with different woods that you've never been able to practice making a bow and drill fire with, I think it's a bit of a risk. So he did end up getting a fire going, but it was quite a struggle. And he mentioned a few times that, man, if I don't get a fire going today or tomorrow, I'm going to be forced to tap out due to dehydration, because he wouldn't be able to create a fire to purify his water. So I think it did a good job showing how difficult starting a bow drill fire can be. I mean, he was trying all sorts of different woods, because some woods are just not bow drill fire friendly. He even tried a piece of dried animal poop as his hearthboard, but it fell apart and it never ended up working. But he did eventually, after a lot of effort and sweat and wasted calories, get a fire going, purify his water, and get a drink. As he's drinking his water, he notices a white monkey in the tree checking him out, which I thought was wild. I mean, I can't even imagine being from Canada, just being in the bush and you look over and there's a monkey. it was wild. Just a good reminder of how these contestants are in such a foreign land with different plants, animals, bugs, just fish. Everything's just different. And I often wonder how I would have fared in that environment with everything so different and not really having a chance to research for more than a month or two. So the next morning, he wakes up and Baja starts fantasizing. Well, he told the audience a little fib about this incredible breakfast that he just had. And it was almost like he had a bit of a food fantasy, which I thought was a little bit surprising because, man, you guys, you wouldn't believe how powerful the food fantasies were. But I didn't have my first food fantasy until like in the 40s. Sure, I thought about different types of food, but I mean, when I was lying in my teepee and I'd wake up and I'd be like almost frantic, thinking about like a Hawaiian pizza, Doritos, and peanut M&Ms. Those were the three foods that just kept popping into my mind. And oh, it was just such a powerful experience, like wanting that food so badly. I was a little bit surprised that he had it on the second day. I mean, if he's thinking about food on the second day, you wait till you're in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, how powerful those food fantasies become. It's pretty wild. So next up on the episode, we met Nathan. Now, Nathan is from Idaho, and he's actually the older brother of Luke from season 10, who I was up at Ranger Lake with in 2022. And their father is an OG survivalist. His name is Larry D. Olson. He authored a very famous book, a very famous survival book that's still available today, and he became very famous. And so that whole family was immersed in survival, especially primitive survival skills. So I have no doubt that Nathan is going to show us some pretty cool stuff. So his first scene is catching grasshoppers with his hat for bait. And he catches one and he gets a set line out in the water right away. And he talks about how his father taught him the belly first approach to survival. And that reminded me of something Luke said in season 10 during one of his first scenes was, yep, my dad always says, fill your belly basket first. So Nathan did some research on the rainfall in that area, and he mentioned it's very, very unlikely that they're going to be dealing with a lot of rain in that area during this time of year. So he's not worrying too much about his shelter, and he's completely focusing on food procurement. So after he sets up his sleeping area, he makes a mat out of dried grass. He decides to go down to check his set line. Sure enough, there is probably about a 1 to 2 pound fish at the end of his line, and he's got food on his very first day. Well done. So Nathan decides to go on a little hunt/scouting trip, and he does something that I was impressed with. He did something that a lot of inexperienced hunters overlook. He hunted, or he was exploring an area with the wind in his face. When the wind is in your face, obviously the animals ahead of you are not going to smell you. And many ungulate type animals, their nose is their primary defense against predators. So I had an interesting experience with a cow moose and a calf years ago when I lived up in Fort Nelson. I was in a cut block, a massive cut block, and I was bow hunting on top of a large slash pile. And at the very end of the cut block, and it was probably 300 to 400 yards away, a cow moose and a calf came out from the side, and they walked across. I was watching. I'm like, oh cool, maybe there's a bull around. And all of a sudden that cow jerked her head up, looked around, and she beelined with her calf as fast as she could run into the bush. And there was nothing around. I thought, oh, did a wolf come out? Is there a grizzly? But no, it was me. The wind was directly at my back, and she pegged me from 300 to 400 yards away. And that really taught me a valuable lesson, how powerful an animal's nose is. He also knew that in the morning, the thermals or the drafts will be coming down the ridge towards him with the cool air. And as the morning heats up, they will switch and the wind will travel up the hill as it heats up. And elk hunters know this very well. So during his little exploratory hunt, he sees a red hartebeest, he sees a sable, and he sees a bunch of wildebeest. Incredible. I gotta say, I'm envious of the amount of game opportunities these contestants are gonna have this year. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy, because those animals are extremely wary, because everything in Africa is trying to eat them. But man, just to have that opportunity and to be able to observe them and perhaps set up a blind or a tree stand to get them coming to and fro food source or water would just be, it's super exciting to me, and I'm a little envious. I mean, we were allowed to hunt moose and bear, but I didn't see a single moose or a single bear, and I was trying. I hunted pretty hard for moose during the rut. They didn't show any of it because I wasn't successful. And stories on alone, they want you to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In my moose hunt, it just had a beginning. There was no middle and there was no end, so it didn't make the edit, but I did try pretty hard. Nathan shares with the audience how he wants to wait until it cools down a bit before he really puts in an effort at big game, because with this heat, there will not be much time to process the animal without the potential of losing most of the meat. Next up in the episode is Doug. Doug North from New Hampshire. Now there is another Doug on this season, but he goes by Douglas. Okay, so let's not get the two confused. So Doug's intro was different than all the other ones. It was like a sped up compilation of little clips of him drinking, of him lighting his fire, working on his shelter fence, eating something off a tree, berries or seeds of some kind, just kind of sped it all together. And I guess the producers did that to kind of avoid repetition, just introducing all the characters the same way, because I guess the audience would probably get a little bit bored watching everybody light a fire, watching everybody boil water, watching everybody build a shelter. So they just kind of change it up a little bit, which, I don't think is such a bad thing. And they got right into Doug talking about his boma. So that is it's like a thorn fence. They did years ago, like 10, 20 years ago, I remember on Survivor, when Survivor was in Africa, they had a huge thorn fence around their camp to keep the lions out. So it's like a mini version of that. And that boma is just to discourage critters from coming into your sleeping area at night. And he said it was working pretty well. I thought maybe Doug's shelter would be underground. So Doug notices an animal up on the ridge watching him. And he wasn't sure what it was. He's looking at it. He's like, I don't see any horns. And it was a zebra. And he mentioned he's never seen a zebra before in the wild. You're not allowed to hunt them this season on alone due to local regulations, but a cool sighting nonetheless. So Doug heads out with his bow, kind of on a scouting / hunting trip, just to check out the area. And if he comes across something he can harvest, great. So he ends up actually finding 2 freshwater crabs, one big one, one little one, which he grabs because, any source of protein is good. And I mean, there's not a lot of meat on a crab, but it's better than nothing. I mean, I was tromping through the bush trying to shoot squirrels, which was like literally a few mouthfuls of food. I actually stopped doing that because walking around in the moss and the trees, I was expending so much energy chasing after these silly squirrels. And when I actually, broke them down and looked at them, it was like literally their legs were like this big. I'm like, this is not worth it. It's literally a couple of mouthfuls of meat on a squirrel. But I mean, if you're not expending energy, then for sure any sort of food is calories, and that is a good thing. So he grabs the crabs, brings them back, and he ends up making a crab stew. So he throws the crabs in the pot. They didn't really show how he processed them. He might have just thrown them there whole and picked out whatever meat or organs that he could. But he also threw in some foraged plants. And I was impressed to see that Doug not only has some hunting skills, but also was able to identify various edible plants in the area to add to his stew. So good work, Doug. So Doug spoke about his food procurement philosophy, and he talked about how the best way to preserve your food and your calories is to get it in your belly as fast as you can. And it's a good philosophy, especially in this hot environment where preserving your food is very difficult. Here's what I really enjoyed about Doug. I loved his enthusiasm, his positive attitude, and how he showed gratitude. I mean, he was so thankful for this whole experience, just being there and simply being alive. And he threw a nice comment right at the audience. He goes, "And I hope you are too." And he was so passionate when he said that. It was almost like you could hear in his voice that he got a little bit emotional when he was saying that. And I love that how he was just so thankful for being there. And when you're out there, being thankful for things. And I researched this a little bit before, so I made an effort to be grateful and to be thankful, because when you're grateful for what you have, it allows you to stay positive. And keeping a positive attitude when you're out there is very, very important for your mental game, because you got to remember, you've got a button in your pocket at all times that you can just press and you're out of the game. And without a positive attitude and being thankful and grateful for things that are happening to you, it can be hard not to press that button. So up next, we met Douglas, and they introduced Douglas the same way they introduced Doug, this sped up compilation of multiple clips with him kind of mumbling over top of it. Now, like I said earlier, I think they're just doing that to avoid being redundant, showing competitors doing all the same thing. Once that sped up compilation was over, they showed Doug looking around on the ground around him, and he noticed all the nappable rocks that can be fashioned into stone tools. And he was very impressed by this, and he also talked about how early humans were here at this spot, or in this area anyways, and he was just very intrigued and thought deeply about, kind of the origins of humanity may have started close to this area where he was, which I found pretty interesting. So you got to remember, this is on day 3, and he says he wants to work on a shelter because he's tired of sleeping underneath the stars. So he's working on a shelter, he takes a break, he lies down, and he's awoken by some deep guttural noises, like a large critter of some kind. I'm not sure if it was dubbed in, but he definitely heard something, and he got up quite quickly. I was impressed with how he got up. So he was on his knees, kneeling, and he stood up quickly just by on his toes. And I tried doing that, and I got bad knees from volleyball, and I couldn't do what he did. And he's the oldest competitor of the season, and he sprung up like nothing. So that guy's obviously in very good physical shape. I was impressed by it anyways. So Douglas did not sleep well that night. He was constantly woken up by animal sounds all around him. And then the producers put in, I assume it was a clip from a game camera. So when I was out there, I had 2 game cameras set outside my shelter, one in the front, one in the back. And they do that in case your shelter burns down or some sort of emergency happens that you're not able to film because you're trying to save your life, but they'll still be captured. So I assume it was a game camera that caught a beautiful large rhino not far from his shelter. The final person we're introduced to this episode was Colton. Now, if you watched my previous video about introduction to the cast and my pick for the win, Colton is the person that I picked to win. And his first scene is hauling in a large catfish. And he mentioned that, oh, I forgot to film setting out all the lines. And I totally understood that, because there's many things out there that I didn't film. It's I remember lying in my teepee in the morning, and I'd hear grouse fly and land near my shelter. And I remember grabbing my bow and running out there. And guys, I didn't grab the camera because sometimes you have to weigh, okay, am I gonna risk not getting this food while I, put batteries in and get my camera ready? And no, so I think that was kind of a case there. So he processes that big catfish, and he cuts it up into pretty small pieces, and he air dries the meat over a branch near his camp. And probably like you, I instantly wondered about the flies and the ants and even the birds that would see that there and quickly consume it. But it appeared they went back to it later in the episode, and it was still there. Nothing had taken it, and it was already starting to dry. But he did mention how it smelled fishy. So I guess we will never know if insects did lay eggs in the meat that he had hanging up on the tree. So I really liked how Colton fashioned a hammock for a sleeping arrangement. I mean, what a great idea, keeping yourself off the ground with all those bugs and scorpions and giant spiders, whatever other insects live in Africa, because I literally have no idea, but I'm sure they're big and I'm sure they bite. But you know, when I went on to season 10, one of the items was a hammock, and I think this season selecting hammock as one of your items might not have been such a bad idea, especially after listening to Nathan say that it almost never rains in that area this time of year. I also liked what Colton said about his hunting strategy. He's just not going to head out and start hunting all the animals he sees. He's going to observe them first, take note of their movements, and just get an idea of what they're like before he tries hunting them, their patterns and whatnot. And because, you know, if you've hunted before, you'll know that if you blow a stalk on a mature animal, like let's say a bull elk or a moose, or even a mature whitetail, and they know that you're after them, it's very unlikely that you'll ever see that animal again. So good move on his part. He sees a few impalas, but they notice him right away and they spook, and he also is being yelled at by all the baboons. He spots another animal, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I think it was a water buck, and he said it was about 300 yards away, and even at that distance, the animal noticed him. Talks about his dad and how he lost his dad when he was 22 years old. You know, that hit deeply for me. I wasn't that young when I lost my dad, but still I could totally relate to him. And he spoke about how much of an impact his dad had on his life and how much he misses him. So we're back to that catfish he caught earlier. He decides to boil up a big pot of fish head soup, which I did multiple times. And actually, at the beginning I hated it, but by the end I looked forward to it and actually loved it. So he boils up this big catfish head, and as he's doing so, he carves himself a wooden spoon to eat the soup. And you've got to let it boil for a long time to get all the collagen and all the fat and everything that's in that fish head just kind of releases and floats up to the surface. And when he figured it was done, you know, he grabs a spoon, and this part really grossed me out because you could see the slime trail off his spoon. What he thought was fat floating on the surface was actually just fish slime. So he grabs a spoonful of it, and you can see it like hanging. It looked like an egg yolk hanging off. I'm sorry, egg white. It looked like an egg white hanging off his spoon, and he slurped it up. He's like, "Bleh," and he starts dry heaving, and it was just terrible. And it did remind me of one of my scenes. One of the, I think it was the third fish I caught. It was a lake trout, and it was full of eggs. And I knew that those eggs had so many nutrients and oils and fats. Even if I didn't want to, even if I wasn't hungry at that time because I'd gained a bunch of weight, that I needed to eat it. So I boiled them up because I was afraid of getting sick from eating raw fish eggs. So I boiled them, and man, I was forcing them down, and I also was dry heaving. And I got a lot of texts on my phone after that scene. And people who watched me on my first episode, they assumed I'd be gone really quick. They're like, "What kind of survivalist is he? He's like throwing up after eating fish egg. He'll be gone soon." Because I think it might have been that same episode they showed Lee. Lee also caught a fish full of fish eggs, and he just grabbed it right out and he just slurped them right down. So during that night when he was sleeping, his hammock failed. I couldn't remember exactly what he said, but something ripped or something let go, and he fell to the ground. And then he realized he needs to find a different location and build a more permanent site to sleep. So as he's working on his shelter, he mentioned that he's feeling pretty rough. And at that point, I didn't really know what he meant. I thought that, you know, maybe he's feeling sick, maybe he's tired, maybe he needs to eat. Then he talks about how he can't even imagine eating that fish. It just makes him feel sick even thinking about it. And I thought it was obviously from just eating that fish slime. You know, when you eat something and even the smell of it for days afterwards kind of makes you feel nauseous. But then it kind of developed into something more, and how he just wasn't feeling happy. I mean, he's in the situation he wants to be. Everything's going okay. but he's just feeling really rough and really unhappy. When I was watching it, for a while, I thought that he's having like delayed drop shock symptoms, you know, like experience the same sort of thing that many people feel right after they're dropped off, because it's pretty overwhelming. Like there's so much build up to being on the show, and you're dropped off. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm here. Oh, and the emotions really come out, and you got to fight through that. So that's kind of what I thought he was having at first, but it turned out to be something different. As the scene went on, he talked about depression. They show him trying to battle through these feelings that he's having. But he ends up saying, you know what, I don't want to feel this feeling anymore, and I really need to talk to somebody. So he ends up tapping out of the competition, and we are down to 8. And yeah, it was day 4 that he tapped out. That was a tough one for Colton, and you know, I felt really bad for him. And when you're in a solo survival situation, I mean, all your emotions just become so raw. Everything just kind of comes to the surface, and he decided it was too much, and removed himself. And you know, no judgment from me, because none of us can really understand what was truly going through his head. So in 4 days, we have 2 competitors tapping out. I'm not sure if that's a record or not. If somebody wants to fact check that and put it in the comments. Fun fact, season 10 of Alone has the record for the longest period of time before someone taps out, and that was on day 19. Folks, I appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. I find the comments very interesting, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And we'll see you next week.